Welcome to Char TV. I'm Mason, and tonight we're diving into one of the most fascinating ways to uncover the mysteries of Halloween, the iceberg concept. Picture an iceberg. What you see above the surface is just a small part of the whole story, while the larger, more hidden parts lie beneath the water. This is a perfect metaphor for Halloween. On the surface, we have the traditions everyone knows: trick-or-treating, costumes, jack-o'-lanterns. But below that, buried deep in history, are darker and more mysterious origins. As we explore each layer, we reveal something more unsettling: ancient rituals, forgotten folklore, and haunted legends that shape the Halloween we celebrate today. The further down we go, the deeper and darker the secrets become, leading us into the abyss, where we find the most disturbing truths hidden in Halloween's history. So join me as we descend through the layers of this iceberg and uncover the hidden terrors that lurk beneath. This is Char TV, and you're watching The Haunting Abyss, Halloween's darkest secrets revealed. Also, if you enjoy videos like these, please subscribe and check out the channel for more. Trick-or-treating. Trick-or-treating is perhaps the most iconic Halloween tradition, especially in the United States, where children eagerly dress up in costumes and go door to door in search of candy. The practice is widely recognized today as a light-hearted, festive activity, but its origins are much older and somewhat darker. It traces back to ancient Celtic and medieval practices where people would go souling or guising, visiting homes and offering prayers for the dead in exchange for food or coins. Over time, this transformed into what we now know as trick-or-treating, with the emphasis shifting from prayers for the deceased to children playing harmless pranks or performing tricks if they didn't receive a treat. By the 20th century, trick-or-treating became widespread in North America, with candy companies fully embracing the tradition, turning it into a highly commercialized holiday activity. Today, it remains a beloved part of Halloween, with neighborhoods coming alive on October 31st, as children in all kinds of costumes roam the streets, bags open and ready for their haul of sweets. Costumes and masks. The tradition of wearing costumes on Halloween has deep roots in the holiday's origins, stretching back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. During Samhain, it was believed that the veil between the living and the dead was at its thinnest, allowing spirits to cross over into the mortal world. People would dress up in animal skins, masks, and costumes to disguise themselves from malevolent spirits or to blend in with them, ensuring they could safely navigate the night without being harmed by the supernatural. Over centuries, this practice evolved into the wearing of costumes for fun, and as Halloween spread across different cultures, costumes became more elaborate and creative. In the early 20th century, the practice shifted toward dressing up as ghosts, witches, and other supernatural creatures, drawing directly from Halloween's spooky atmosphere. Today, Halloween costumes have grown to include everything from pop culture characters to political figures, making the holiday a time for both scary and humorous displays of creativity. Jack-o'-lanterns. One of the most recognizable symbols of Halloween, the jack-o'-lantern, originated from an old Irish folktale about a man named Stingy Jack. According to legend, Jack was a cunning trickster who managed to trap the devil and trick him into agreeing not to take his soul when he died. However, when Jack eventually passed away, he was refused entry into both heaven and hell, leaving his spirit to wander the earth. To light his way, Jack carried a carved-out turnip with a burning coal inside, giving rise to the tradition of carving lanterns out of vegetables. When Irish immigrants brought the tradition to America, pumpkins, much larger and easier to carve than turnips, became the vegetable of choice. Today, the glowing faces of carved pumpkins are a ubiquitous part of Halloween, with jack-o'-lanterns ranging from simple, smiling faces to intricately detailed works of art. The flickering candlelight inside the jack-o'-lantern adds to the eerie ambience of Halloween night, serving as both decoration and a nod to the holiday's ancient roots. Haunted houses. Modern haunted house attractions have become a cornerstone of Halloween entertainment, where thrill seekers willingly pay to be scared by actors dressed as ghosts, monsters, and ghouls in meticulously crafted horror scenes. These haunted attractions are designed to evoke fear, using sound effects, visual tricks, and immersive environments to create a sense of dread and excitement. However, the concept of haunted houses ties back to Halloween's association with the supernatural and the belief in spirits returning to the world of the living. Real haunted locations such as abandoned homes, castles, or battlefields were believed to be inhabited by the restless dead, and ghost stories have long been a part of Halloween traditions. As Halloween became commercialized in the 20th century, haunted houses evolved into the staged, controlled environments we know today. These attractions capitalize on the thrill of fear, drawing crowds eager to be spooked, while still maintaining the holiday's connection to the eerie and otherworldly. Candy and commercialization. One of the most notable aspects of modern Halloween is its overwhelming focus on candy. In the weeks leading up to October 31st, store shelves are stocked with chocolate bars, gummy treats, and colorful assortments of candy designed specifically for trick-or-treaters. The rise of candy as a central part of Halloween didn't fully take hold until the mid-20th century. Before that, children who went trick-or-treating might have received small cakes, fruits, or even money. However, as candy companies realized the potential to capitalize on Halloween, they began marketing their products specifically for the holiday. By the 1950s, candy had become the standard treat, solidifying its place as a Halloween staple. Today, Halloween is one of the biggest candy-selling holidays of the year, with billions of dollars spent annually on sweets. The focus on candy has shifted Halloween into a heavily commercialized holiday, transforming it from a night of ancient rituals and superstitions into a celebration of indulgence and fun. Samhain. At the heart of Halloween's ancient origins lies the Celtic festival of Samhain, celebrated over 2,000 years ago across what is now Ireland, Scotland, and parts of Northern Europe. Samhain marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of the dark, cold winter, a time associated with death. The Celts believed that on the night of October 31st, the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred, allowing spirits to pass through. This was both a time of celebration and a time of fear, as the dead were believed to return to Earth, causing trouble and mischief, damaging crops, and haunting the living. During Samhain, large bonfires were lit to guide friendly spirits and ward off harmful ones. People wore animal skins and masks to disguise themselves from any malevolent spirits they might encounter. The festival also involved various forms of divination and fortune-telling, practices thought to be more powerful during this time when the spiritual and earthly realms were so closely connected. The merging of Samhain traditions with later Christian festivals helped shape Halloween into the holiday we recognize today, but many of its original superstitions and customs continue to echo through modern celebrations. All Hallows' Eve. As Christianity spread through Europe, the Catholic Church sought to replace pagan festivals, like Samhain, with Christian holidays. In the 9th century, the Church established All Saints' Day, also known as All Hallows' Day, on November 1st, a day to honor saints and martyrs. The night before became known as All Hallows' Eve, which eventually evolved into Halloween. This Christianization of Samhain retained many of its supernatural elements while reframing them in a religious context. During All Hallows' Eve, people would attend church services and light candles to guide the souls of the departed to heaven. Over time, traditions from Samhain, such as wearing costumes to ward off spirits, blended with these Christian practices. Souling became a common practice in some parts of Europe, where poor people would go door to door, offering prayers for the dead in exchange for food. This practice would eventually evolve into trick-or-treating. Despite its Christian overlay, All Hallows' Eve never fully lost its association with the supernatural. The belief that spirits roam the earth persisted, and the night continued to be seen as a time when the veil between the living and the dead was at its thinnest. This blending of Christian and pagan traditions would form the foundation for the modern Halloween we celebrate today. Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. While Halloween is often associated with ghosts and fright, Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, is a holiday that also honors the dead, but in a much more celebratory way. Predominantly observed in Mexico and other parts of Latin America, Dia de los Muertos has roots in ancient Aztec and Mesoamerican beliefs, which held that death was a natural part of life and that the dead continued to exist in a different realm. Celebrated on November 1st and 2nd, the holiday is a vibrant and colorful celebration where families gather to honor their deceased loved ones with offerings known as ofrendas, consisting of food, flowers, photos, and personal items. Although Dia de los Muertos and Halloween are distinct holidays with different meanings, they share similar themes of remembering the dead, and both stem from ancient traditions centered around honoring spirits. In recent years, the two holidays have sometimes been conflated in popular culture, particularly in the US, where Halloween celebrations often overlap with Day of the Dead, parades and events. Bobbing for apples. Bobbing for apples, a light-hearted game often played at Halloween parties, actually has deep roots in ancient Roman and Celtic traditions. The game stems from Pomona, the Roman goddess of fruit and orchards, whose festival was celebrated around the same time as Samhain. Apples were seen as a sacred fruit, symbolizing fertility and abundance, and bobbing for apples became a form of divination in which young people would attempt to bite into floating apples in a barrel of water. The first person to successfully bite an apple would supposedly be the next to marry, and the apple they caught might be peeled and the skin tossed over the shoulder to reveal the initial of their future spouse. As this Roman tradition blended with Celtic customs during the early merging of cultures, bobbing for apples became associated with Samhain, and later with Halloween. Though now viewed as a fun party activity, its origins are tied to ancient beliefs about fertility, the harvest, and the supernatural, reflecting the deeper layers of Halloween's historical connections to divination and fortune-telling. Witch trials and Halloween. The association between witches and Halloween is deeply ingrained in the modern celebration of the holiday, but it is rooted in the darker history of witch trials and persecution, particularly during the 16th and 17th centuries. During these periods, women, and some men, who were accused of practicing witchcraft were often tried, tortured, and executed, most famously during the Salem witch trials of 1692. Halloween's connection to witches likely stems from Samhain, when the Celts believed that witches, alongside other supernatural beings, would be more powerful as the boundary between the living and the dead weakened. Over time, witches became a symbol of Halloween, embodying fear of the unknown and the supernatural. Popular culture has further cemented this association, with the image of the cackling witch, dressed in black with a pointed hat and broomstick, becoming an iconic Halloween figure. Yet behind the playful imagery lies the darker reality of historical persecution, when real people were accused of witchcraft and condemned for it, leaving an indelible mark on history. Black cats and superstition. Black cats have long been associated with bad luck, particularly around Halloween. This superstition dates back to the Middle Ages, when black cats were often linked to witches and the supernatural. In European folklore, it was believed that witches could transform into black cats, allowing them to sneak around undetected while casting spells or causing mischief. Black cats were seen as omens of bad luck or even death, and this superstition has persisted through the centuries. Despite the negative connotations, black cats are also viewed as symbols of mystery and magic. In some cultures, they are considered good luck or protectors against evil. Their association with Halloween likely comes from the night's broader focus on the supernatural and otherworldly, where the boundary between the living and the dead blurs, and where creatures like witches, ghosts, and black cats roam free. Today, the image of the black cat is a popular Halloween motif, though its origins are far more complex than its modern, decorative use might suggest. The legend of Stingy Jack. As mentioned before, the story of Stingy Jack is a key element in the evolution of Halloween's most iconic symbol, the jack-o'-lantern. This Irish folktale explains the origin of the carved pumpkins with flickering candles inside that are seen on doorsteps during Halloween. Stingy Jack was a notorious trickster, known for deceiving everyone, including the devil himself. As the story goes, Jack invited the devil to have a drink with him, but when it came time to pay, Jack convinced the devil to turn himself into a coin so they could avoid the bill. Once the devil transformed, Jack pocketed the coin next to a silver cross, trapping the devil and preventing him from changing back. Eventually, Jack freed the devil, but only after extracting a promise that his soul would never be claimed for hell. When Jack finally died, he was refused entry to both heaven and hell, leaving him to wander the earth for eternity. The devil gave him a burning coal, which Jack placed inside a hollowed-out turnip to light his way, This led to the tradition of carving out vegetables, originally turnips, then later pumpkins, into lanterns to ward off evil spirits. The eerie glow of the jack-o'-lantern and its connection to the dark, trickster nature of Stingy Jack adds a layer of folklore to Halloween that is both mischievous and haunting. Ghosts and the veil between worlds. One of the most enduring beliefs surrounding Halloween is that it is a night when the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead is at its weakest. This concept dates back to the ancient festival of Samhain, where it was thought that spirits of the dead could easily cross over into the realm of the living. During this time, people would light bonfires to keep away the darker spirits and leave food offerings to appease those spirits that roamed the earth. In this tradition, ghosts represent the souls of those who have not moved on, either trapped by unfinished business or by the thin veil of Halloween itself. The idea of spirits returning on this night permeates Halloween culture, from the portrayal of haunted houses to the belief in ghostly apparitions. The practice of wearing costumes also ties into this belief, as it was originally meant to disguise oneself from these wandering spirits. The presence of ghosts in Halloween lore connects the holiday deeply to themes of death, remembrance, and the supernatural, and reinforces Halloween's role as a night where the unseen becomes seen, if only briefly. Reye, the original trick-or-treat, souling. Long before children in costumes were knocking on doors asking for candy, there was the medieval tradition of souling. This practice originated in parts of Europe where, on the night of All Hallows' Eve or All Saints' Day, poor people would go from door to door offering prayers for the dead in exchange for food. They would receive small cakes known as soul cakes, each one representing a soul freed from purgatory thanks to the prayers of the soulers. The prayers were intended to help the dead find peace and reach heaven more quickly. Souling is seen as a precursor to modern-day trick-or-treating. As the tradition evolved, children began dressing in costumes, often as saints, angels, or spirits, and going door to door, singing songs or offering prayers in return for food or money. While today's trick-or-treaters may not be asking for soul cakes, the act of knocking on doors and receiving treats is a direct descendant of this centuries-old practice. The shift from prayers for the dead to fun and playful trick-or-treating is one of the many ways that Halloween has transformed from a religious and spiritual event into a secular, community-focused celebration. The Banshee. In Irish mythology, the Banshee is a harbinger of death, a spirit whose mournful wail is said to predict the passing of someone in the family. Though not specifically tied to Halloween, the Banshee's association with death and the supernatural fits well within the holiday's larger themes of spirits, mortality, and the unknown. The Banshee is often described as a woman with long, flowing hair and a ghostly appearance, either dressed in white or grey, wandering near the home of the soon-to-be deceased. Her scream, known as the caween or keening, is a mournful cry that can be heard from a great distance and strikes fear into those who hear it. In some versions of the legend, the Banshee is a family guardian, warning of an impending death as a way of preparing loved ones. In others, she is a vengeful spirit tied to the land, forever wailing for the loss of life. The presence of a Banshee is one of many examples of how Celtic mythology has influenced Halloween, particularly in its connection to death and the thin boundary between life and the afterlife. The wail of the Banshee is not just a warning of death, but a reminder that death itself is ever present during Halloween, waiting just beyond the veil. The curse of Halloween. Candy. One of the most persistent urban legends surrounding Halloween is the idea that candy given to trick-or-treaters could be tainted or poisoned. This fear reached its peak during the 1970s and 1980s, when stories began circulating about strangers tampering with Halloween candy, lacing it with dangerous substances, or hiding sharp objects like razor blades inside. Parents were warned to carefully inspect their children's candy before letting them eat it, and this paranoia became a defining part of Halloween for many families. The reality, however, is that very few actual cases of candy tampering have ever been confirmed. One of the most notorious incidents, the 1974 Candyman murder, involved a father who poisoned his own son's Halloween candy with cyanide to collect on a life insurance policy, feeding into the fear that Halloween candy was dangerous. The story created widespread panic and fueled the urban legend of poisoned candy, even though most reports turned out to be hoaxes or misunderstandings. While the fear has diminished somewhat in recent years, the myth persists, and many still associate Halloween with the potential danger lurking in their children's treat bags. This modern legend speaks to the darker side of Halloween, where trust between neighbors is overshadowed by fear and suspicion. Apple divination. Apple divination was a common practice during Samhain and early Halloween celebrations, often used to predict future marriages or other significant life events. Apples, seen as symbols of fertility and abundance, were used in various forms of fortune-telling games. One popular method involved peeling an apple in one continuous strip and throwing the peel over one shoulder. The shape the peel formed when it landed was said to reveal the first initial of the person's future spouse. In another version, young women would cut an apple into 9 pieces, eat 8, and throw the 9th over their shoulder, hoping to see the image of their future lover appear behind them. As mentioned in an earlier entry, another common form of apple divination was the game of bobbing for apples, which was not only a party game, but also a way to foresee romantic futures. The first person to successfully bite into an apple while bobbing would supposedly be the next to marry. These traditions are reflective of Halloween's older, more serious role as a time for divination and communion with the spirits, a far cry from the light-hearted games they've become today. The Halloween arson spree. While most people associate Halloween with harmless pranks and spooky fun, in some parts of the United States, the holiday has a much darker association with arson. In Detroit, Michigan, for instance, the night before Halloween, known as Devil's Night, became infamous for widespread fires set by arsonists. Starting in the 1970s and peaking in the 1980s, hundreds of fires were deliberately ignited in vacant buildings, abandoned houses, and even in some occupied structures. Devil's Night fires reached a crisis point in 1984, when more than 800 fires were reported across the city in just 3 days. The fires created an atmosphere of fear and chaos, transforming what should have been a night of celebration into one of destruction. Communities in Detroit came together in subsequent years, forming neighborhood watch groups and patrolling the streets to prevent further arson. These efforts eventually led to a significant decrease in fires by the 1990s. Despite these improvements, the association between Halloween and arson still lingers in certain areas, a stark contrast to the playful mischief that defines Halloween elsewhere. The Halloween arson spree serves as a dark chapter in the holiday's history, showing how societal issues like poverty, urban decay, and crime can influence cultural traditions. The haunted history of Halloween masks. Halloween masks, while often seen as fun or spooky accessories for costumes, have a darker side when you look into their history. From ancient rituals to modern criminal activities, masks have long been associated with both hiding one's identity and invoking something otherworldly. The use of masks in Halloween traditions is rooted in the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, when people would wear animal skins or masks to disguise themselves from the spirits believed to walk the earth on that night. This practice was meant to protect the wearer from being recognized by these spirits, or even taken to the other side. In the 20th century, as Halloween became commercialized, masks took on a more playful tone, but they still retained an eerie quality. One of the most famous examples of a mask tied to darker events is the Michael Myers mask from the Halloween film franchise. The mask, originally a Captain Kirk mask painted white and used in the film, became an iconic symbol of terror. More chilling, though, is the fact that real-life crimes have been committed by individuals wearing masks to conceal their identity, especially on Halloween night. The anonymity provided by a mask has historically allowed people to commit crimes, including robberies and assaults, without being easily identified. In this way, the Halloween mask represents both the festive and sinister aspects of the holiday. The Legend of Bloody Mary. The Legend of Bloody Mary is one of the most enduring urban legends associated with Halloween and sleepovers alike. The tale goes that if you stand in front of a mirror in a dark room, usually a bathroom, and chant Bloody Mary 3 times, the ghostly figure of a woman will appear in the mirror. In some versions of the legend, she is a vengeful spirit who scratches or harms those who summon her, while in others she simply appears as a reflection covered in blood. The origins of the Bloody Mary legend are murky, but many believe it is rooted in old divination practices. In the 19th century, it was said that young women could catch a glimpse of their future husband's face by gazing into a mirror while walking backward up a staircase holding a candle. However, if they saw a skull or a ghostly figure instead, it meant they would die before marriage. This practice morphed into the Bloody Mary legend we know today, but its connection to Halloween is tied to the holiday's focus on the supernatural and the thinning of the veil between worlds. The act of summoning spirits through mirrors is a powerful symbol of the human desire to connect with the unknown. Yet, it also taps into our primal fear of what we might see staring back at us. The Halloween 1963 murders. The Halloween 1963 murders are a lesser-known but deeply disturbing event that took place in the United States. In Indiana, on Halloween night, 3 teenage girls, Patricia, Darlene, and Sandra, were found brutally murdered in their home after a night of trick-or-treating. The case shocked the local community, and investigators were left baffled by the seemingly random nature of the crime. The house showed no signs of forced entry, and the girls' costumes were still in place, making the murders even more unsettling. Despite an extensive investigation, the case remained unsolved for decades, and theories about who might have committed the murders range from vengeful spirits to a deranged killer taking advantage of Halloween night's anonymity. While the case may not have achieved the national attention of other Halloween crimes, it left a lasting impact on the local community, and it became a source of urban legend in the area. For many, the unsolved nature of the crime added to the mystery of Halloween, reinforcing the idea that the night harbors not only ghosts and ghouls, but real-life monsters as well. The Halloween 1963 murders serve as a reminder that the holiday's atmosphere of playfulness and fear can sometimes intersect with tragic real-world events. The case of Halloween night disappearances. Halloween has long been associated with pranks, trickery, and fright, but in some cases, the disappearance of individuals on Halloween night has crossed the line from eerie coincidence to true crime mystery. Several high-profile cases of disappearances have taken place on Halloween, adding an extra layer of fear to the holiday. One such case is that of Cindy Song, a 21-year-old college student from Pennsylvania, who disappeared on Halloween night in 2001 after attending a party. Dressed in a bunny costume, Cindy was last seen being dropped off at her apartment, but she never made it inside, and her disappearance remains unsolved. Another case is that of 9-year-old Cherry Mahan, who vanished after getting off the school bus on Halloween in 1985. Despite extensive searches and media coverage, Cherry was never found, and her case remains a haunting mystery. These stories, while rare, have contributed to the unsettling belief that Halloween night can be a time when people simply vanish without a trace. The heightened sense of anonymity and mischief on Halloween, combined with the natural darkness of the season, makes these disappearances all the more eerie, leaving families and communities searching for answers long after the Halloween decorations are put away. The Festival of the Dead in ancient Egypt. In the deepest recesses of Halloween's ancient origins lies a link to the Festival of the Dead as celebrated in ancient Egypt. Though Halloween as we know it has no direct connection to Egyptian culture, the concept of honoring the dead, which permeates Halloween, echoes the ancient Egyptian practices related to the afterlife. The Egyptians were deeply concerned with the fate of the soul after death, believing that the dead continued to exist in a different realm where they needed sustenance and guidance. They performed elaborate funerary rituals to ensure the safe passage of the soul through the afterlife, including offerings of food, drink, and goods left at tombs during festivals like the Feast of the Valley. During this festival, which took place in Thebes, families would visit the tombs of their ancestors, leaving offerings and holding feasts in their honor. This celebration mirrors Halloween's tradition of honoring the dead and the belief that during certain times of the year, the boundary between the living and the dead becomes porous. The ancient Egyptians sought to maintain a connection with the deceased, believing that spirits could bless the living or cause harm if they were not properly honored. In many ways, the ancient Egyptian reverence for the dead provides a fascinating parallel to the spiritual roots of Halloween, where the dead are remembered, celebrated, and feared. Human sacrifice in Samhain. The ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, from which Halloween descended, is often associated with the darker practice of human sacrifice. While the true extent of this practice remains a matter of scholarly debate, Historical accounts suggest that the ancient Celts may have believed in appeasing gods or warding off evil spirits by offering human lives. The idea was that on the night of Samhain, when the veil between worlds was at its thinnest, the spirits of the dead roamed freely, and blood sacrifices could help protect the community from harm. Some ancient texts mention the burning of criminals or captives in large bonfires as offerings to the gods or as a way of purifying the land. Though human sacrifice in relation to Samhain is not well documented and could have been exaggerated by Roman accounts, the idea that the festival had darker, bloodier rituals persists. The bonfires we associate with Samhain were meant to cleanse and protect, and some folklore holds that these fires were once fueled by sacrificial offerings. This concept of human sacrifice deeply contrasts with the light-hearted Halloween we celebrate today, but it serves as a reminder that the festival's origins are rooted in death, fear, and appeasing forces beyond human control. The history of the Witches' Sabbat. The Witches' Sabbat is one of the most chilling and misunderstood aspects of historical Halloween beliefs, deeply entwined with the persecution of witches throughout Europe. The Sabbat was said to be a gathering of witches who met to perform rituals, invoke dark forces, and celebrate their allegiance to the devil. These supposed gatherings were the subject of hysteria and fear during the witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries. Halloween night, or the night of Samhain, was believed to be a particularly powerful time for witches when they would convene under the cover of darkness to practice black magic and commune with spirits. Witch trials often featured accusation of participation in sabbats, with alleged witches confessing, sometimes under torture, to attending these midnight meetings. The sabbats were said to involve blasphemous rituals, feasts, and sometimes even human sacrifices to gain power from the devil. While much of this was likely fabricated by religious authorities to justify the persecution of women and outsiders, the image of witches gathering on Halloween to perform dark rites has become a central part of Halloween folklore. The modern image of the witch on Halloween, with her pointed hat and broomstick, is a direct descendant of these ancient fears and stories. The cursed village of East Lothian. Among the lesser-known but deeply unsettling stories connected to Halloween is the legend of the cursed village of East Lothian in Scotland. According to folklore, this small village was once the site of a horrific curse laid upon it by a group of witches on Halloween night. The story goes that a powerful coven was wronged by the villagers, who accused them of witchcraft and sentenced them to death. As the witches were burned at the stake, they vowed that the village would suffer under a curse, and that misfortune and death would follow those who lived there. After the execution, strange and tragic events began to unfold in East Lothian. Livestock would mysteriously die, crops would fail, and illness spread among the villagers. Some reports say that on every Halloween night, a terrible storm would descend upon the village, bringing death and destruction in its wake. The legend persisted for generations, with many believing that the witch's curse still lingered, particularly on Halloween, when the boundary between the living and the dead was at its weakest. Though there is no historical evidence to support the existence of a literal curse, the story of East Lothian reflects the deep fear of witches and the supernatural that dominated much of Scotland's history. The cursed village serves as a haunting reminder of the power of belief, the destructive force of fear, and the dark consequences of persecuting those who are considered different or dangerous. The ghost ships of Halloween. The idea of ghost ships has long been a part of maritime folklore, but their connection to Halloween adds an even more sinister layer to the legend. On Halloween night, it is said that ghost ships, vessels doomed to sail the seas forever, appear on the horizon, carrying the souls of the dead. One of the most famous ghost ships associated with Halloween is the Flying Dutchman, a legendary ship cursed to sail the oceans for all eternity without ever reaching port. According to the legend, sighting the Flying Dutchman is a bad omen, often signaling disaster or death to those who see it. In other tales, the ghost ships are said to be the spirits of pirates, sailors, or fishermen who perished at sea under mysterious circumstances. These spectral vessels appear in the mist on Halloween night, their crew made up of the dead, silently navigating the waters before vanishing once more. The eerie sight of a ghost ship in the distance conjures the fear that Halloween represents, the fear of death, the unknown, and the boundaries between the living and the dead becoming porous. Ghost ships are a fitting part of Halloween's deep lore, as they symbolize the restless dead, those unable to find peace or closure. The legends of ghost ships seen on Halloween remind us of the dangers of the open sea, where countless lives have been lost, and where perhaps some spirits still wander, waiting for a final journey that will never come. The Halloween Vampire Panic. Perhaps one of the most bizarre connections to Halloween is the fear of vampires that swept across parts of Europe during the 18th and 19th centuries. This period, sometimes referred to as the Vampire Panic, was fueled by superstition, disease, and the fear of the dead returning to harm the living. Villagers across Eastern Europe, particularly in areas of Romania, Bulgaria, and Serbia, believed that certain deaths, especially those from unexplained diseases like tuberculosis, were the result of vampirism. It was thought that the dead would rise from their graves to feast on the living, spreading illness and death throughout the community. To combat this, villagers would exhume the bodies of the recently deceased and perform gruesome rituals to prevent them from rising again. This often involved driving stakes through the heart, decapitating the body, or burning the corpse. The vampire panic eventually reached Western Europe and influenced Gothic literature, including Bram Stoker's Dracula, which remains one of the most famous vampire stories ever told. The connection to Halloween comes through the shared themes of fear, death, and the supernatural. While the vampire panic may seem like an ancient superstition, it reflects humanity's deep-seated fear of death and the unknown. Halloween, with its focus on the dead and the afterlife, provides a perfect backdrop for the retelling of vampire lore. The idea of the dead returning from the grave to wreak havoc is at the very heart of the holiday's dark, ancient origins. And there you have it, the full descent through Halloween's chilling iceberg, from the familiar traditions we all know, down to the forgotten rituals, haunted legends, and unsettling truths buried deep in history. As we've seen, Halloween isn't just about costumes and candy. It's a night rooted in ancient fears, eerie superstitions, and the mysteries of life and death. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the abyss. I hope you've gained a new appreciation for the hidden layers of this holiday, and maybe even discovered a few secrets that will stay with you long after the night is over. This is Mason, and you've been watching Char TV. Stay curious, stay brave, and until next time, happy Halloween. Don't forget to subscribe.